Good morning, church. I can only say that Jesus is my rock. Maybe some of you can also consider rock climbing, although they do say that extreme sports sometimes can get you extremely hurt. Anyway, it's such a joy for me to be back here again. I was recently, not too long ago, at your church camp, and I do see many faces and familiar faces and friends, even our midst. I'm always surprised to find that it's not just Anglican churches where people like to sit at the back. That seems like other churches, you're also sitting at the back. In any case, it's so exciting to look at all those old pictures. Some of you, it went by quite quickly, but the Jubilee pictures, I was trying to look for a younger version of Pastor Lawrence. It was a dear friend of mine who I really admire him for all that he's done and the wisdom that he carries with him. So I'm here today to talk to you about something very close to my heart, which I feel is very important. We look at how the church has grown in the 50 years, 49 years now, coming to 50 years, right? Entering into a Jubilee year. So much time has passed. And we often talk about time as if we can somehow manipulate and manage time. We use language like, I want to save some time. I want to bide my time. Stretch your time. And for some people, maybe even kill some time. It almost seems to suggest that you can do something to control time. But in reality, we have no control over time. You only can do your best with what time has been already given to every one of us. And this is true of our lives in general, all of us in our life. You have to ask yourself, what are you doing with your time? In the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, this is a very beautiful passage, speaks about time. It says, to everything, there is a season. A time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, time to plant, a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, and time to build up. The passage continues. This very beautiful, exposition of time and how we engage time in our lives. And while we cannot get more time, whatever time you have is what you have. I sometimes tell people about rock climbing, YOLO. Do you know what's YOLO? I guess this younger crowd here, what's YOLO? You only live once. Right? You can do whatever you want with your life, but you can only do it one time. This ticket only gets you around the merry-go-round one shot. So, when we think about our time in our lives, there's a certain season for everything, and we should know what time it is in our lives. In fact, Jesus, the Son of God himself, was very cognizant of the time that he had in his life. In John chapter 9, verse 4, he said, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. That is, daytime. For nighttime is coming when no one can work. So even the Son of God was mindful that, I have this time. I cannot just squander the time. Some very important things need to be done during this time. In the same way, in the Old Testament, in the Bible, there's a particular tribe that was, that seemed to stand out because of time. This is known as the tribe of Issachar. They are not a car, but they call themselves Issachar, right? So 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32, it says, the sons of Issachar, who had an understanding of the times. The word times here is translated in the Greek, in the Septuagint, as kairos. Not just time as in, what time it is, chronological time, but a season, right? What season it is. To know what Israel ought to do. So along with the knowledge and understanding of the season comes an awareness of your responsibility within that season. Jesus expected the Jews, at least, to recognize what time it is. He said in Matthew 16, he says, when it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather. For the sky is red, and in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening. Hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. So Jesus expected us to know what time it was by looking around us, right? Looking at your circumstances, looking at the sky, looking at what he calls the signs of the times. So if you will ask yourself, what time is it today? Some people will say end time law because, war in Israel, right? A lot of people will say end time. But then again, they always say this, COVID also end time, right? Earthquake also end time. Cold War also end time. It's been end time for a long time, right? So when it comes to us, sometimes we become a bit jaded. So what kind of any time lah? Any time. So Jesus expected us to know the time. Because with every season and a time, there's a responsibility. King Saul, when he was anointed. He was just a young man from a small tribe, in a smallest family, in a small tribe. And when he was anointed, Samuel came to him, and there was something very interesting that was said about him. You find this in 1 Samuel chapter 10. It says, "Then the Spirit of the Lord will come upon you, or upon Saul, and you prophesy with them," that's with all the other prophets, "and be turned into another man." So the Spirit will come to you, you become someone else, then let it be, right? When these signs come to you, when all these things happen, that you will do as the occasion, as the season, as the time demands. For God is with you, right? So God has a purpose for every one of us. Turn to your neighbor and say, God has a purpose for you. But before we can know that purpose, we have to understand the times. So today, I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing Bible exposition with you, although I love to do that. But I want to spend this time telling you about the season that we are in. And to do that, I'm going to look at some statistics. Now, I know that some of you are seated all the way back there, but when you see the chart now, you wish you sit nearer in front now, because I didn't realize that your screen is slightly smaller than the screen in our church, right? But bear with me, you don't need to see all the small one, but if I ask you what's the lowest line, EZ377, okay, you try to do that, right? Okay, we're going to put a chart up here. I'm going to show you a chart. Can we have that? Okay, this chart is yeah, see what I mean by all you people are sitting at the back there. See, no, there's still empty chairs up here in front. So what this chart is, it is the demographic profile of the church. In this case, it's the Anglican church, right? Because I don't have data for your church. I have a data for about 20-something churches. So, but I think that's a fair representation of the sampling of Singaporean churches in general. The red color bars represent the age demographic profile of the church in the year 2020, right? So year 2020, this is, actually it's the current 2023. So what does this chart tell us? On the right-hand side, older people. On the left-hand side, younger people. So if you look at this chart, you notice that in the red chart, there is a bump, right? On the right-hand side in the middle, there's like a higher bump than all the other bumps. You can see that, right? There's a like Baluku there. That group there represents, each bar is 5 years, right? So that group there represents people from the age of 50 to 70 years old. 50 to 70 years old. So what this immediately tells you is that there's a lot of old people in church today, right? If I were to just quick poll, how many of you are above the age of 50 here? So raise hands. Yeah, quite a lot of you, right? Quite a good number of us. Actually, more in the first service. So this is kind of true, because Singapore as a whole is an aging country, right? So in fact, if you look at the chart, the red bit, you notice there are more to the right half of the chart than to the left half of the chart. Almost as many as 3/5 to the right-hand side and 2/5 to the left-hand side. There are more old people in the church than there are in the younger people in the church. Now, on the right-hand side, you have to ask yourself, why are there so many old people in the church? Is it because in their old age, they got very free time, they come to church? Or is it because, when you're older, you become more open to Jesus and you come to church? Actually, that's not the reason. The main reason why you get the bump there is because that bump there represents the Christians who came to Christ during the charismatic renewal. Back in the 70s and 80s and even 90s, there was a large influx of people into the church because God was moving in a powerful way across this land. It doesn't matter whether you're in fact in a charismatic or non-charismatic church. When the sea level rises, all the ships and all the boats rise together with it. So throughout Singapore, every church grew in a tremendous amount. That group of people, that's who they are. And they have been in the church for the last 40 or 50 years. They've been here. They've been serving the church. By the way, they paid for the buildings of the church, right? Through all these years, they've been faithfully doing what they could do to grow the church. Today, that's the group that you see, the biggest bump in the... But this chart tells you, there's a blue graph there. It's not very clear on this chart, but actually there's overlaid, there's a blue. That blue chart is a projection of where the church will be in 7 years' time, in the year 2030. In the year 2030, the old people, no surprise, will get older, right? They're all getting older. So everything will move to the right a little bit. Your church will have a lot more old people. In 15 years' time, the whole front row here will all be cleared away. There will be wheelchairs here. You can't put wheelchairs at the back of your church because your church is quite dangerous. The slope is this way. You let go only, they'll be in front. So you might as well start them out at the front here, right? Correct? there'll be more wheelchairs in the church. Unless you ask them to come to church, right? So that's what's happening. The church is going to age. And in fact, in 20 years' time, many of them will be off the chart. They'll fall off the chart already. They'll be with Jesus already, right? That's basically what's going to happen here. But on the left-hand side, if you go look at the left, the red chart, you go to the left, you can see there's like a little small plateau, right? With a small bump before it drops off. That little bump there, that's the children of the first generation. The children of that charismatic renewal generation, right? But after that, it drops off quite precipitously. Partly because we are not having kids anymore in church. By the way, if you are married couple, have more kids. It's one way of growing the church, right? So, of course, keep the kids in church also, right? So that's one. But that's not happening. That's not really happening. As you know, the TFR in this country is something like 1.1, 1.2. And nobody have a 0.2 child and I give birth and, there's a 0.2 kid. Doesn't happen. What that means is that you only have one kid. One kid. Most people have only one child. And for every 2% that drops off the chart, only one is being replaced by their children. Why does it go off further off? Because we are not winning the children. Young people are not coming to Christ as we like. Okay, so this chart, I'm going to show you another chart. By the way, this chart is a very serious chart. Because if you understand this chart, you understand that in 15 years' time, the church is going to be 2/3 the size. Doesn't matter which church you are. Why? Because whenever these people, one of these tall charts on the right, when it drop off, it's only being replaced by a very tiny chart that's coming in on the left-hand side. So this is, you don't have to be a prophet to know this. By the way, I always tell people I work for a non-profit organization. So I'm not a prophet, nor a son of a prophet, but this is statistics. I'm very good at numbers. So when you look at these numbers, it's a foregone conclusion that in 15 years' time, there'll be less people in church. And what does that mean? That means your missionaries will have to come back because they're also growing old, right? Some of our missionaries are so old there, they'll probably be buried in that country, in mission field already. But then, you got no money to send, you don't have missionaries to send, and you got no money to send them, so there'll be less missionaries. Churches, in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, your lease is going to be up. If you have less members, many churches will close. They cannot afford to pay the lease. This is a very serious problem. In fact, it is what I call an existential crisis. This is what's facing the church today. And people don't know it yet. Sometimes I feel like I'm Noah, It's raining. The flood is coming. Everyone knows, how can it be? We say so many times already. I feel like we are in that kind of time. Very serious problem. I want to show you another chart. Okay, this chart, as you can see, even more reason to sit in front, right? Now, this is a slightly more complicated chart, but bear with me, right? Blue line, the lowest line, is representing the numbers in the year 2000. Orange line, plus 10 years, 2010. Gray line, year 2020, right? Quite close to our time. So what this chart is a generational tracking. I want to know what happened to each generation during this time. So if you look at the bottom left of the blue line, right? The starting of the blue line, you can see it starts somewhere in the low middle here. That group, that represents the number of 15 to 20-year-old Christians in the year 2000. So they're starting around, let's say the number is about 17,000, right? About 17,000 of that in the whole of Singapore. By the way, this is only Protestants, all right? Only Protestants. Okay, in 10 years' time, what happens to this group of people? They get older. 15 years old, they become 25 years old. But the numbers grew. Look at that. You go straight up. Now they are around 26,000. Wow. 15 years old, become 20. That whole group of people continue to come to Christ, right? So you get that jump. Another 10 years, they continue to grow. Wow, look at that. They're now 33,000. You go straight up, just go straight up. Now they are 35 years old. There's 33,000 of them, right? So you see, wow, God is doing something in this particular generation. They are growing, they're coming to Christ. They are almost double in numbers. Now you look at the right-hand side of the chart, you see a very different picture. Anything from 35 years old onwards, you can see the lines practically overlap one another. That is to say, in 20 years, in 2 decades, that group hardly grew at all. Hardly grew at all. It tells you a number of things. Whatever it is, why does it hardly grow? Could be whatever it is that we are doing for evangelism is not working. Not with that group anyway. Maybe whatever you're doing this side is working. Over that side, it's not working. It could also be that, once you get to about 35 years old and onwards, you're very busy with a career. You're very busy with your family. You're very busy climbing the corporate ladder. So you got very little time for spiritual things or even to think about your destiny, right? So that group of people, you are not reaching them. And perhaps some of you can relate to this. You are trying to bring your colleagues, your work colleagues to church. You know, actually, they are very unlikely to come. Or even they come 1 or 2 times, after that, they don't want to come already, right? So this is what this chart is telling us, that somehow on the right-hand side, it's not working. Now, this picture is very interesting because you know why? We are so used to patting ourselves on the back and saying that, well, you know, Singapore has grown from 18.6% to 18.9% in the last 10 years. But that is not a very true picture, to be very honest. First, that number includes Roman Catholics. Roman Catholics, by the way, are having a lot more kids than you guys are. Oh, by the way, I was told to say hello to those online. Yeah, hello online. You see these empty seats in front here? Yeah, that's where you guys are supposed to be, right? But you're at home online, but hopefully you come to church, right? So, Roman Catholics are having more kids than us, so they are growing. But if you only look at Protestant numbers, from 2015 to 2020, Christianity in Singapore has actually decreased in numbers by anywhere between 0.2 to 2%, depending on the numbers, because there's a bit of discrepancy in the numbers. But it is a decline. We have crested. We have just crossed the top, and if you're not careful, it's going to go all the way downhill. This is a very serious problem. Because the moment you have less people, you have even less children, and even less power to bring people to church. It's a compounding problem, right? Now, we thank God for that generation who have come, you know, in a charismatic renewal. I mean, you guys did a great work. You support the church. You powered the church through. Many people of that generation, you will feel almost like, you know, ROD. ROD, you know, when kids go to army, right? Then there'll be a few days before the passing out parade, they all relax already, right? Don't have to be so. You already feel, look, I'm not going to be in the army for very long. I'm going to be out already. And many of the older people are like this. You are cell group leaders. You're carrying all these ministries. And you're probably thinking to yourself, I do so many years already. It's time to let the younger people do already. Am I right? Some of you, I've been in cell so long, I should be out on parole now, right? For good behavior. Some of you are in cell ministry, right? So, I didn't say prison ministry. So you're thinking, I don't want to do already. Others will tell me, Pastor, you don't know, I owe already, you know. My petrol tank, E already, you know. You know what's E, right? What's E? E is enough. Why you also negative one? E is enough. Still can go 20 kilometers. Guys, I must say to you, your generation, the fight is not over. I hate to break this to you. Reservists call up again. All of your generation who think you are about to go, I'm sorry to tell you, you are needed, desperately needed in this generation. You know why? Because of this chart. All those people there, evangelism has not happened in the 20 years. What do you think is happening? There are lots and lots of people in that generation who are not yet saved. And the young people are not going to be the ones talking to them. Many of you are what is now called young seniors, right? So make you feel a bit better. It's a euphemism for, you know, don't know your age, right? So, but you're older. Some of you are into retirement. You got lots of time. Retirement, basically, you know, what are you going to do, right? Look after grandchildren, right? If you have grandchildren. But other than that, play golf. So now you got a lot of times to go out with friends because they are equally bored with their lives also. It's a great opportunity that we can do something for them, all right? So this is that kind of chart. Now, why was it that the young people grew so much in this chart? Look at the left-hand side, right? Why did they grow so much? I want you to think about this. I won't answer this question now. I hope I remember to answer this question later, right? But I want to suggest that there are some very good reasons why that happened. And we want to look on to this. Okay, so this is something I feel is such an important thing for churches to wake up. And not just the church. Every Christian should realize that you are now caught in the greatest fight the church has ever faced. The Church of Singapore. This is the greatest battle we have all been facing. I mean, now we are facing the biggest battle we've ever faced for the survival of the church. Whether you're young or you're old, this is our battle now. This is where we are. You see, there's a life cycle to everybody. There's a time to be born and a time to die. So all of us, once you were a kid, then you grow up, maybe you start working, you get married. And for women, there's a certain season, right, that you can bear children. After that, all of us get old, and then finally, you go and see Jesus, right? So somewhere in this childbearing age, now, usually the childbearing age are supposed to start anywhere from 15 years old up to, what's the top end of it? About, they used to say 35, right? 35, but I noticed that Singaporeans, you know, you are overachievers. So sometimes 40 years old still having children, right? You guys are trying very hard. But after about 40 years old, that's it, you know. You don't have kids, you're just not going to have kids anymore, right? You can come to church, you ask pastor to lay hands on you, you can fast and pray. Just not going to happen. Because once that door is closed, it is closed. Now, same is true for churches. Churches also have a life cycle. Do you know that? Churches are born, they mature, they grow up. We saw almost a timeline for your church, right? Now your church is well established. I wonder what biological age you put your church in. Is this church still in the childbearing age? What do you think? How many of you think we are still in the childbearing age? Hey, you still, wow, you don't think you are in childbearing age? This is a problem, man. I think you are in childbearing age, right? If maybe closer to 40 years old, but you guys are still doing something. But you got to have a lot more children, right? This is something. But you know, there are churches, they already missed the boat. I talked to some churches where the pastor told me, Pastor, I only have one youth in my church. 13 to 18 years, only one youth. You know, one youth, I'm thinking to myself, they might have passed the point of no return at this point. Because when you have only one youth, imagine this youth was touched by God. He go to church, he go to school. He bring 5 of his friends to school. The 5 friends, that week you have 6 youth in your school, but in your church, right? But these 6 youth, they come, they see around here. Wow, the whole church are all white hair, if they even have hair left, right? They're only old people. Do you think they're going to come back the next week? They're not going to come back. If anything, your one youth will follow them to go to some other church, probably Heart of God, right? So that's where all the young people are going. You follow what I'm saying? So if you don't do something about it, when you can do something about it, a time will come where you can't do anything about it. You know, if you are not faithful with what you have, even what you have will be taken away and given to those who are reproducing. Actually, that's a parable of talents, isn't it? So this is something that we actually have to think about. And that's true of the church, it's true of you individually as a person. So the church has a life cycle. If we miss the boat, it's going to be a very, very difficult uphill climb, right? Many of you here look like you're probably old enough to remember this name called Nokia. You all remember Nokia? Yeah, some of you probably know. The younger people, what's Nokia? I don't know, right? But back in our day, Nokia was a king of cell phone. So, I mean, there were others, right? There were Ericsson, that was quite good. But Nokia, when it came along, it was the king of cell phone, mainly because, you know, of the snake game. It was the bane of pastors. It was the bane of pastors because, you know, every service without fail, you know, because they haven't invented the mute button yet, right? It's probably because the church they invented the mute button. But everyone knew Nokia. The phone was built like a rock, you know. You can bang it on table, you can throw it in the washing machine, come out, still work, right? Actually, it probably answered the call while it's in the washing machine. It's just, you can't destroy this thing. Very solid phone. But where's Nokia today? Gone. When Microsoft acquired Nokia, the CEO of Nokia was giving his final speech, and he was in tears, he was crying. And in his tears, he said, you know, we didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost. They continued to produce good phones, the same phone, 9910, 9938, all those numbers. They continued, they didn't change anything, but they still lost. Churches are also like this. You know, we are doing what we are doing, the same. 1980s until now, we're still singing the same songs. Actually, I like the old songs, you know. I must say, because I'm from 1980s, obviously. I mean, that era, not that I'm born in 1960s. So this is really something that's very true of us. And which is why today, Nokia is, well, you know why they're called Nokia, right? Bokia, you know. They don't have any children. There are no descendants. The church cannot afford to be Nokia. Are you following what I'm saying? Now, we might think, well, we are doing nothing wrong. What? Listen, it's not enough to do nothing wrong. We have to innovate. You have to break new ground. You have to go places you have never been before. If all you do is pat yourself on the back that, okay, we have been doing this, I tell you, it is not enough. So what must we do? Right? What must we do in the face of this greatest battle that's facing us? I want to suggest a few things that we can think about. This is obviously not comprehensive, right? But let me just start with the older generation. As I mentioned before, the older generation, you have to basically reactivate. You have to rethink how you are viewing your retirement. Because those years can be very fruitful years. And really, you might be the last chance for that generation before they go to a Christless eternity, right? So actually, we all have to start thinking, you know what, instead of thinking, how can I slow down? You have to think, how can I make the most of the time, the season that God has given us? So I want to suggest that, churches, especially English churches, need to totally rethink their elderly ministry. Because unlike the Chinese churches who have elderly people all along, our church, English church, are only beginning to realize that people are getting older, and that they don't have any plans or strategies. And you have to be the ones to think, because the church cannot pay enough people to look after all the old people in the church. The old people in the church need to come up with a solution for the old people in the church and in the community. So this is something I think critically important. But it also means that we will rethink our strategy, the approach. I always say, if what you're doing now work, it will have worked already. The fact that we are in the situation today tells us that what we are doing now is not enough. It's not enough, right? So maybe some of you want to do that. Much of our strategy of outreach in our English-speaking church is actually targeted at the upper echelon of society. It's targeting the educated, English-speaking, tertiary educated people in our society, which is only about 30% of Singapore, right? But everyone, almost every church, English, they're all targeting this group. These are the rich people, right? They got money on. You talk about apologetics, you talk about all this philosophical stuff. You try to talk about, success in life. This is 800 churches all have their line in the same small pond of this 30% of Singapore. And that's why growth in Singapore stagnates, because there's an 80% of Singaporeans that do not fit into this category that we are not reaching. That means we have to do something different. Whatever you're doing with this group that works with this group, very good, it's not working with this group, right? I have a lot of white-collar, blue-collar people in my church, taxi drivers, hawkers, and all that. You talk to them about Josh McDowell apologetics, they don't care. They never ask this question. None of them have ever said, I don't come to church because I disagree with your doctrine of sanctification. None of them ever think about this, right? So your approach to them has to be completely different. Last September, we had a concert. We paid string orchestra, with Hu and all that. We had a concert for our community, for our uncle, auntie, mother, father, all who refused to come to church. We said no preaching at all. In fact, no Christian songs at all. It's just a wonderful concert, mid-autumn lah. And we even gave them a very nice mooncake, $10,000 worth of mooncakes. We were eating mooncakes until it was all coming out from our ears for the leftovers. We gave them a mug, which same mug as your had also. We basically sweetened the deal as much as we can. They came. 2,000 people came, about 70%, 60 to 70%, first time stepping into a church. You know what? They had such a great time that night. I mean, it was a professional orchestra. Many never heard orchestra. They had such a good time. Many started saying, when's your next one? These people, now they are willing to, because you know why? Many of this generation that you need to reach, their problem with coming to church is not philosophical. It's not doctrinal. It's not theological. It is social and it's cultural. They are not used to being in church. They feel church is very strange. When we come to church, people talk in, certain way. Hallelujah. First of all, that's not even English or Chinese for that matter, right? And then on top of that, some of you speak in tongues. That is even more confusing for them. So you can just imagine, for these people, it's a social cultural. Now they came. Wow, all of a sudden, this was beyond our expectations. Taxi drivers, taxi drivers picking up people near our church, happen to be our staff. Told, hey, are you attending this church? Yeah, I'm attending. Taxi drivers say, wow, did you come for the concert or not? Very good, you should come. Never come, yeah, wasted. These are taxi drivers are now our evangelists, right? So, another couple, they came for a concert, right? Go back, quarrel with the husband. I said, what happened? The wife keep berating the husband. I told you to come, you never come. Very good, you wasted, got good thing, you never come. So much so, husband always lose one, right? So, she said, okay, next time I'll come. So they asked us, when are you doing this next? You guys are already doing this, right? You guys are already doing this kind of thing. So I feel almost like, what Chinese say, pan men nong fu. Pan men nong fu is Lu Pan. Lu Pan is a master, ex-master, not ex-man, but, chopping ex. He's an ex-master. right? It's like showing off your X skills in front of the X master. Right? I feel like I'm telling you what you're already doing very well. But this is what we need to do. Not only at the church scale, community scale, but even at individual scale. You must find creative ways. Why am I rock climbing, bouldering? I'm putting my life at risk because we got non-Christians coming with us. You know, by the way, rock climbing is, you're not on the rocks all the time. Most of the time you're on the floor looking at other people climbing. That's a great time to talk. Wow, you know, life can drop down, die anytime. You know, Jesus. Okay, but you know, basically you need to make friends. Sometimes some people told me, Pastor, at first I wonder why you all spend so much money to do this. We pay a lot of money to do this. Then after the thing said, now I understand why. Because all these people are so positive about the church. You have to invest. You have to do something out of your, Chinese say, 放长线钓大鱼, right? Don't try to close the deal on the first meeting. It's like you walk to someone on the street, you first date only, will you marry me? Obviously the answer is no, right? I mean, they must like you first, right, before they'll marry you. Actually, evangelism is very much like this. You're trying to adopt people in the church. So some of our old ways of evangelism need to change. So older people, you have to do something different. In our church, we have exercise program. You probably have it too, right? Every week, we've got Zumba and all kinds of dance program. And then we also have this thing called Rumikyu. Rumikyu is basically sanctified mahjong, because, you know, some people get offended they play mahjong in church. So, okay, we play Rumikyu. But Rumikyu is great because you can't play alone. You must have at least 3 other people, right? It's like mahjong, you need other people to play together with you. Guys, this is what we all need to do. You need to dig yourself out of your introverted cave. You can come back out. We got a battle to fight on our hands. Second group is the middle, I guess the middle section now, which is quite a broad section. These are the people that are starting to get into the working world, right? You are focused on your careers. You're focused on success in life. You're focused on your families. But you are also the most educated, the most equipped, the most well-resourced, the most informed, probably the most energetic generation of all of this. But you're also the most distracted and busy generation. So all the energy is not coming into the kingdom of God. A lot of times it's going into all these other things that are, you know, we feel important to do. And the truth is, I don't really know what to do for this generation. It's not as if they're one generation. There are all kinds of different people here. And today is not the time for me to go into all this kind of thing, but it behoves me to just tell you that if you are in this generation, you are like Esther, you know, Mordecai telling Esther, perhaps you were born for such a time as this. And you need to really start sitting up and don't just think about those career things. You know, why did God put you in the middle of this great existential crisis of the church today? So this is something I think quite important, right? If that's you, maybe you want to think about, you know, other than spending all your time in your work, are there ways you can creatively start to expand your non-Christian friend? By the way, after you're in church for 5 years, you lost all your non-Christian friends because you're quite holy now, right? So you need to find ways to engage intentionally, befriend, and not just befriend in a weird way, right? Not befriend, you know, I come and say, I give you things, you know, I give you orange once a year. So not the kind of befriending as actual real friends that you do things together, right? So that is challenging. That takes time, that takes effort, but this is really your life, right? And you have many ways to do it, including rock climbing. So I want to come to the last part, right? The last part is really the youth and the children. By the way, this is the most dramatic growth area. If you invest in this, you're almost certainly going to, you're going to survive longer. Because, you know, some churches, they are already dying. I'm helping many churches, and some of these churches are in ICU. I feel like I'm the doctor who's coming to them and say, I'm sorry to tell you, stage 4 already, you know. So, or sometimes I tell them, you know, I hate to tell you this, but your funeral music already started. But don't worry, it's a very long song, 20 years, or maybe 30 years. But it's already started. You don't do something about it. You play to the end and then bye-bye, right? So I think for children, this is one of the saving graces. If you invest in your children's program, invest in reaching out children. This is so good in so many ways. I don't have time to tell you this, but let me just tell you about what's happening in our church, right? We have a children's program. We run a children's birthday party once every 2 months. So 6 times a year, we run children's birthday party. For this birthday party, anyone whose children or kids, or you know, uncle, auntie, they have kids, right? Nephew, nieces, or even community kids, If your birthday falls within these 2 months, you come because special something. And when they come, we have theme. Maybe 1 month it is Jurassic Park. And then our whole 4th floor becomes Jurassic Park. You know what I mean? They spend weeks turning out the place. It's almost like going into USS like this, right? Like sound effects, everything. All the children, they were dressed like the Jurassic Park, the people. It's like, we even got dinosaurs in there. So the kids come, they're like, whoa, my goodness, right? They love it, and they enjoy such a great birthday party. Of course, we preach the gospel to them in these kind of things. Okay, they go back. But their birthday doesn't come until 1 more year, right? But you know what? They don't care. They still want to come, right? So 2 more months, roller coaster party or ice cream party or whatever. They keep coming, and you know when they come, they drag their parents to church. Right? They drag their parents. Parents don't want to come. I ask the parents, you want to come to church? They say don't want. But the kids, Mommy, party starting already. Okay. They come to church. And when they come to church, all kinds of things happen. This is something so important. I think invest in your children's program. It is, just last Sunday, we saw 24 community kids, right? Non-believers accepted Christ. 44 came, 24 accepted Christ. That's more than 50%, right? My math is correct. Yeah, just more than 50%. I know you're doing this already, but you can do even more. Okay, so this is very important. But again, the key is that you have to do things that you have never done before. And when you do it, I believe God helps. Because God knows we need a new revival. We need a new revival to make up for all the revival generation that's going. And I believe God is doing something in our church. I really believe so. Many times people ask me, hey, what is school doing? I said, to be very honest, I don't know what's happening. I just get out of the way only. We had a lady who, this morning, she's getting baptized. But she came to church a few months ago by accident, right? She was going to church. She got off the wrong bus stop. She was not going to church. She was going somewhere else. But she got off the wrong bus stop in front of our church. So in her lostness, she wandered into church. And she thought, okay, since I'm here, I might as well attend, right? So when it came to church, okay, our church have a lot of Hokkien-speaking people. Now we're trained already, all Hokkien Peng already, right? So she felt very comfortable. She came into church. That day, she accepted Christ. Right? A few months ago, today, she's getting baptized this morning, right? So this is amazing. Now, I didn't do anything. A lot of times, we do a little bit of things, and you know what? God matches you dollar for dollar, right? But you don't put in anything, well, then there's nothing to be gotten, right? I got a lot of these kind of stories. I don't want to spend too much time in it, but I want to tell you, friends, we are in a crisis. That this is not the time to shake our legs. This is not a time to relax. This is a time for us to fight. In Ezekiel chapter 37, God brought Ezekiel in the spirit to show him this great big plain, right? This was a battle plain. In times past, many wars have been fought in this plain. The bones were scattered all around these plains. So it was a valley of dry bones. And God asked Ezekiel, Son of man, can these bones live? Now, Ezekiel, he was a smart cookie. He knows this is a trick question. Can these bones live? Then he turned to God and said, you say that, right? So God says, prophesy to these bones. And he does. And then off in the distance, you hear this, all these sounds of bones clattering, coming together. And then like a scene out of a horror movie, muscles, flesh, skin, everything start to appear. Then you have a whole valley of dead bodies. Not going anywhere, just lying there and rotting away, right? Then God says, prophesy again, right? And he prophesied, Spirit from 4 corners, 4 winds came, filled, empowered them. I think this could be a picture of the church today. Yeah, all those people are retiring. We feel like your bones already. God can fill us again, and they became the army, a living army of the living God. That's what we need today, right? In 1939, Hitler's Germany invaded Poland and began set off a chain of events that culminated in what we call World War II. As Hitler marched through the countries of Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, they finally come out to France, right? This is in Europe. They come out to France, large country, but even France could not resist. So in 1940, France collapsed to Hitler's armies. And at that point in time, Hitler already had control of most of Western Europe. Over the channel in England, they're all watching earnestly. What is going on there, Is he going to come here? Is this my problem or not, basically? Is it my problem? Maybe they're on that side, we're on this side. They are problem, right? So maybe that's the problem. Well, England was divided. There are some in England, Chamberlain, for instance, Neville Chamberlain, who decided that, if we leave them alone, they will leave us alone, right? It's not my problem. So he signed some agreements, Munich agreement with Hitler, let him invade Czechoslovakia. We're not going to get involved in all these things. But 1940, England elected a new PM by the name of Winston Churchill. Now, I know not everyone is a fan of Churchill, but this is not about him, not about England. It's about what he's about to say, right? Churchill recognized what was happening. He saw the writing on the wall. He knew that the moment Hitler is done with that, he's coming for England. This is our problem. This is not the problem of some other faraway distant land. This is our problem. So at that point, he decided Great Britain is going to join this war. That's the Great Britain's entrance. And at that point, he gave a speech that I want to read for you because I think this is a very poignant speech for us that relevant to us. This is broadcasters over BBC, but you think in terms of what we are talking about today, right? I will not read it in Churchill's very boring voice, because he's got this, when General Reagan, I'm going to read in ways that we can understand now, right? When General Reagan has called, what General Reagan has called the Battle of France is over. I expect the Battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we stand up to him, all Europe may be freed and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour. Earlier on I asked you, why did the chart on the left-hand side grow so much? Right? The children, why did it grow so much when on the right-hand side of the chart there was negligible growth? Have you thought about it? Why do you think it happened? Is it because some people say, well, because children are in school, they're surrounded by friends, right? Or maybe some say, well, children have a lot of free time on their hands, which is not very true today because, all their free time is now spent playing games, right? Playing games, computer games. It's not very true. I want to suggest that one reason, because I've been thinking about this, right? One reason that this happened is because in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was one church in Singapore, City Harvest, that was crazy about reaching young people. They were so crazy, and by the way, they offended a whole lot of people because all the young people were going to their church, that it provoked churches in Singapore to wake up and do something about young people. I think that's what happened. I think that's certainly one reason. So that begs the question, right? Can one church make a difference? What do you think? I think so, sometimes not in the way that you think, but I think one church can make a difference. And in fact, it may be that it has to start with one church. So today, as we look at this, my prayer is that in 20 years, maybe 30 years' time, you get another geeky pastor who's looking at all these numbers. Hopefully, there's still a church left by then. And he's looking at these numbers, he's noticing, wow, the church was in decline. And, what happened now? Sometime in this 20-something, one church or two churches or maybe three churches, something happened that turned the tide of the war. The question is, who will be that one church? Will you be that one church? Because if one church can make a difference, then by extension, one person must be able to make a difference also, isn't it? Because the church is just a conglomeration of many individuals. So who will be that one person? Let me just close with this short story, because my time is running. In 1836, Texas, the Texas Rangers, that kind of Texas in the US, they were still part of Mexico. They are not part of the United States, right? They are not part of the Union. So they were part of Mexico, and they were in this great battle to secede from Mexico. They want to come out from Mexico. But it was a great, very serious fight for independence. And at that point of time, in 1838, the battle had come down to one place in San Antonio known as the Alamo. This was actually a Roman Catholic mission. But the Texan, I guess the freedom fighters were all holed up in this under the leadership of one colonel, William Travis. And they were faced by an outnumbered big time by the Mexican army. So the Mexican army had put them in a siege. No food, no water, no artillery, no nothing, right? No, they are running out of bullets, weapons also. They don't have anything left. So this was the holdout in this Alamo. This is the Battle of the Alamo. On March the 5th, after many days of siege, the leader, Colonel Travis, summoned all his people together. He says, we can see that the Mexican army, they are about to launch their final assault. We have to decide what we want to do. We can decide to surrender, or we can fight, maybe even fight to our death. So he drew a line in the sand, and this is where the saying comes from. The line in the sand comes from this. He drew a line in the sand, and he said, anyone who's willing to join me and fight to the end, you cross over this line. Well, every one of his soldiers crossed the line except for one guy. And this story doesn't have a great ending, because that day they fought until every one of them died. But you think about this. Today, Texas is not part of Mexico City, right? It's actually part of the United States. That is to say, they might have lost the battle, but the war was ultimately won because there were people who were willing to cross the line, that would not surrender. Today, we are looking at this great situation, and I have to confess, sometimes I wonder, what can we do? It's like such a big problem, and we are so small, Lord, How can we prevail against these almost unstoppable tides? But at the same time, I think God is drawing a line in the sand. Say, well, this is not the first time this has happened in history. God has turned the tide before. And He will turn the tide again. The only question is, who will be the ones to turn the tide? So this morning, maybe my invitation to you is, I want you to ask yourself, are you prepared to cross that line? And you say, Pastor, what line are you talking about? There are many lines. There are many lines in our own head that says, I don't know if this is for me. Don't need to think so much, just go only. There's no time to think already, right? By the time we finish, thinking about what you should or should not do, the battle might be over already. There are lines of pride in our head, lines of tiredness in our head. Some of you have served for so many years. You're actually planning your retirement already now. Just like more retirement, right? So what are you going to do about it? For others, maybe you are in situations, I know the world today are more hostile to Christianity than ever. In your workplace and all that. Last time you can still share gospel to your colleague in workplace. Today it's very hard to do that. But hard doesn't mean impossible, right? It just means you have to pay a higher price. So that's that line. So my invitation to you is, I don't know how many of you want to cross that line, because God knows we are in a desperate situation here, right? The church, not just your church, the whole church in Singapore, I know so many of them. I talk to so many pastors. It's a dire situation. So today I'm just asking and I'm praying that LSBC can be one of those churches, that it can be your finest hour. When this all said and done, people look back and say, wow, those guys on their jubilee, man, they didn't just party, they went out and they fought and they won. That's kind of what it is. Would you stand up as we close in prayer? Would you close your eyes, perhaps? And I know you guys are, experts in doing this. You've been doing this. I told some of my guys, I said, well, good job. Your youth is growing. But I told them, but it's not enough. You need to grow not just 1.2, 1.3. You need to grow 5 times the numbers it is right now just to break even. Because while we are growing, there are many churches that are dying. I guess whatever it is that you're doing is very good. But I'm praying that you will multiply. Not just 20%, but maybe 2,000%, something like this. That's where we are aiming for. We're aiming to win. We're in this to win. Not for ourselves, but for the kingdom of God. So as eyes are closed, it's about, if you're saying, Pastor, I'm willing to be counted in, right? To cross this line. Would you just raise your hands? No one looking around, just put our hands wherever you are. We're not making a big deal out of this, but it is a big deal for you, for God, and particularly for the next generation. If this is you, say, Pastor, I want to be part of this fight. This is my fight. This is my children's fight, my grandchildren's fight. That's you. Would you put up your hands wherever you are, real quick, and then you can put it down again. Anyone? I see all those hands. Yeah. What you're saying is that this is my problem. This is not just Europe's problem. This is our problem. So I see those hands. Lord, you see these hands, and you know what kind of season it is that we're in. Father, I pray, just as you poured your Spirit out on Saul, he became a different man, and he rose up to do what the occasion demands, that you will pour out your Holy Spirit upon all of us here, to bring new life, to raise up a living army from a valley of dry bones, Lord. God, I'm praying that these people become the seeds of a new renewal and revival in Singapore. Something we desperately need so much. And I particularly pray for the younger people. Lord, they are being born into the greatest fight of their lives. And many of them don't even know it yet. But God, I pray that somehow this urgency will grip us, Lord, and make this our finest hour indeed. In the name of Jesus, we ask Him, we pray.